minutes, so probably we can get those formalities done with, and then more and more people
Sure, sure.
should have joined by then. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the TY Patil Postgraduate Psychiatry Knowledge Series. We have been making a conscious effort to bring you a whole range of topics with speakers from a wide spectrum, from academicians to clinicians to researchers. And we are privileged today to have with us two such esteemed people with us to speak to you about the concept of gendered brain. We have with us Dr. Parkar, who the chairperson will be introducing in a few moments from now. I've known her for many years, but we've gotten more familiar and friendly in the last few years with her inspirational messages and books and programs that she has conducted. And I don't want to take away Alim's thunder. I will let him do the honors of introducing her. But thank you, Dr. Parkar, for having made the time and been with us today. Uh, it is also my proud privilege to introduce to you today Dr. M. Alim Siddiqui. He is the moderator and chairperson of the program today. Uh, Dr. Siddiqui is a professor of psychiatry and the head of department at IRA's Lucknow Medical College and Hospital. He is a visiting honorary professor at the GSVM Medical College in Kanpur. He is a director of Healthy Minds, Neuropsychiatry and Behavioral Sciences Center at Lucknow. He is the honorary treasurer of the Indian Psychiatric Society. He has been a direct council member of the IPS from 2018 to 2021. He is also a guest faculty at Amity University at Lucknow. He is the current vice president of the Indian Medical Association of Lucknow. He is the treasurer of the IAPP chapter of the UK and UP as well. He is the editor-in-chief of the Indian Association of Biological Psychiatry. He is an honorary fellow at the IMA. He was the honorary fellowship. He got an honorary fellowship of the IMA in 2021. He has 23 publications and presentations of research, 58 faculty lectures. He has written 3 chapters in psychiatry textbooks. He has more than a few hundred newspaper articles, multiple TV and radio shows, public interaction programs for awareness, and he's also an avid sports enthusiast. Most importantly, this is his formal introduction, but I have known him for a few years now, and he is a very, very driven and enterprising person who has been running a lecture series of his own called Thursday Musings. And today is the 100th episode of Thursday Musings. So that itself is a source of inspiration to many of us, not only in terms of his academic excellence and his efforts to try and bring those academic pearls to all of us, but the biggest take home is his perseverance and his insistence on continuing to come up with these kind of programs. So he is truly an inspiration to all of us, and he has been a part of this program indirectly as a helping hand, but today formally he is on our program. So thank you very much, Dr. Siddiqui, to be a part of this program despite of it being an important milestone day for you. And we hope to see you back with us on multiple occasions in the future as well. And I now hand over the proceedings of the evening to you, Dr. Siddiqui. All over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Rashmin. I think you're too kind. Thank you so much. I have attended this program as an audience before. High quality of lectures is there. Maybe because of time I missed, because whenever I get time, I try to attend this series of yours. So thank you so much for inviting me here, all the organizing team. Thank you so much, Shubhangi ma'am. Let me introduce Dr. Shubhangi Parkar. First of all, everyone knows her. She is so respected, revered, loved. Ma'am, we all look up to you for guidance. So thank you so much for joining us. Her introduction would be she has done her DNB, sorry, her DPM and MD from Mumbai. She is MSc and PhD in International Public Health, PGDHR in Human Rights. She has been a former head and professor of psychiatry at GSMC and KEMH for 25 years, former dean and academic dean, medical educationalist. She has the most number of awards in Indian psychiatry. So that speaks a volume. That speaks a lot about her. Published many national, international publications. Established Marathi writer, linked with many social organization. Contribution as Indian author in World Mental Health book published by Harvard Group with Oxford University Press in USA. She has been writing prolifically in the local media. Uh, so she has a huge circle of influence, and we are very pleased and honored to have you, Shubhangi ma'am, today.
Thank you.
On this topic of gendered brain. I think I'll not delve too much in the topic and just straight over hand over to you. Over to you, ma'am.
Yes, I will just share my presentation. Thank you, Alim. Thank you, Rashmi. Is it seen?
Yes, ma'am. You can do it full screen.
Okay. You can see my slides, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we are going to discuss about the
They're not.
concept.
They are not in full screen, ma'am.
Okay, let me see. Can you now? It is full screen on my laptop.
Okay. Here it is coming as the outline only.
Okay.
I don't know how other people are seeing.
Madam, do one thing. You can stop share screen. Do again sharing. Select first option screen, then share it.
Okay, stop sharing now and do what?
Again share screen. Select first option is a screen, then share.
Okay. Is this now? It is
Yes,
fine.
perfect.
Okay. So we are going to talk about concept of gendered brain, the concept which I liked when I was reading a lot, last 2 years. We talk about gender a lot in psychiatry, but that in terms of understanding pathophysiology, pathology, or the magnitude of the problem, here there is a little bit difference here. So let us look how we go about it. Gender, sex is based on biological factors such as sex chromosome and gonads, that is reproductive organs. Gender has a social component and involves expectation and behaviors based on an individual's perceived sex. So it is exactly how, each sex is expected to behave, in a particular society or in a particular culture. So that is how we understand gender in general. Why gender? I mean, the whole thing, gender in the US means breadwinner, that is a man, a traditional gender role found in the United States that views male as being responsible for the economic support and protection of the family. Housewife, a traditional gender role found in the United States that views females as responsible for child rearing and domestic activities. And this then became very popular all around the world. But this is a very important concept which we are going to look through and understand the brain. Why gendered brain? Why do we have to think about it? Why do men and women think differently? Okay. Why do they behave differently in stress situations? Why do women act more emotionally as compared to men? Why do men and women excel at different types of tasks? Because if you see the engineering or the technological aspects are dealt with by men, and the caretaking aspect, are looked after by women. Why do boys like to play with cars and trucks and Superman? So these are some of the issues which keep coming, and we really need to think that why this happens years by years, why people keep doing these things in terms of the gender specificity. So we will just look at quickly at the male brain. Okay, it is supposed to be 10% larger than female brain, a stronger front to front back connection, and optimize for motor skills are very important. There are quite a few, maybe the weight, it is a 5 ounce more in comparison to female brain. So there are many other issues, but possible health impacts are what? More likely to develop alcohol dependence, 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, 4 times more likely to have autism, twice as likely to develop Parkinson's disease as a neurological disorder. Female brain, the stronger side-to-side connections, optimized for intuitive thinking, which probably is a very famous around people, that women are more intuitive and more gray matter. Possible health impacts, twice as likely to have depression. I think we all agree that depression is much more common, almost 2 to 3 times common in some countries. Okay, twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease, 4 times more likely to develop multiple sclerosis, and more likely to have a stroke. That's a recent finding. So some of these pathological aspect we understand in terms of the gender perspective. There are some issues which keep coming. Are men better at math? Are women better at language? What is the reason that fewer women than men work as scientists and engineers till date? Though we see around us many women are scientists and engineers, but relatively it's much less in comparison to man all over the world. So difference in brain functions. The studies of perception, cognition, memory, and neural functions have found apparent gender differences. Okay, these differences may be attributed to various genetic, hormonal, and environmental factors. Okay, we really have to be a little alert when we talk about environmental factor, but we are going to see within few minutes how. Do not reflect any overall superiority advantage to either sex, though there is functioning difference. Okay, both sexes are equal in intelligence but tend to operate differently. Now this is very important because this finding came in the picture simply because when women brain was thought to be lesser in size by 10%, at that time it is a 200 more than 200 years story. So the women were thought to be inferior in terms of intellectual capacity, and which ultimately over the time by research was proved that they are equal in intelligence, but their intellectual capacities are channelized or operated in a different way. So brain and gender, are they having separate blueprints? A very important question. Okay, men and women appear to use different parts of the brain, especially to register memories, sense, emotions, recognize faces, especially the facial memory of the women is supposed to be far better, solve certain problems and make decisions. Well, this is very important. Okay, general decision making is pretty good in women. Okay, since the brain controls cognition and behaviors, these gender related functional differences may be associated with the gender specific structure of the brain. That's one of the hypotheses which emerge with some of the studies in this particular paper. Indeed, when men and women of similar intelligence and aptitude perform equally well, their brains appear to go about it differently. And that's why the whole concept of gender brain is picking up, as if nature had separate blueprints for both of them. Okay. Now, brain difference between men and women, this is a very nice paper. Evidence from deep learning, that is by Jiang Zin. These are the et al. This study provides a new insight into the structure difference between men and women, which highlights the importance of considering sex as a biological variable in brain research, and which is a very important consideration. Now, these gender-related brain structural differences might be related to gender differences in style of thinking, a philosophy of thinking, emotional control, as well as appearance of neurological disorder. Neurosexism, this concept came and was criticized equally. Neurosexism is defined as the assumption that behavioral differences between male and female stem from variation in brain development rather than from socialization. Okay, now this was something which was taken for granted, and that affected female gender very, adversely, because they female were not allowed to participate in many activities, and then those activities became male dominated activities. For example, in space activities, women were not allowed. Now in the army forces, women are entering, but all those were not allowed, thinking that temperament of the women is physiologically determined. The sexiest assumption that all differences perceived between men and women are direct result of neurological difference. Now, this is something which was probably taken as it is inherent to women, to have the brain which only function in certain areas, and those areas were considered as inferior in comparison to the male dominated world. Now, it relates to historical baggage that has negatively shaped society's beliefs, connecting females to illness, some of the illness like conversion disorder or hysteria, which we know, for a long time. Pathologization of female experience as mental illness. Okay, now depression probably is sometimes considered, is it a little more skewed pathologization of the female experience, and reshaping this was a major challenge in those eras. So this is something which we must know properly, and remember that the idea that brain is responsible for sex and gender differences or imbalances has been with us for a long time. In the 18th century, scientists discovered that women's brain weigh on average 5 ounces less than men's, something that was immediately interpreted as an inferiority. And since then, this biological determinism, in terms of the female brain is inferior, was challenged, especially by women scientists. Okay, Gina Rippon has written a very nice book on the gender brain, where the idea that biological differences reflect the natural order of things to be meddled with by society's, wrongdoings. Okay, so these are some of the issues which we must know pretty well. The next probably which we have to go through is, you can see, right? Biological dimension. Now, females are faster and more accurate than males in recognizing facial expressions. In females, the basic network involved in affective empathy are more developed. And that's why we see some of those emotional differences in men and women, a more elaborate brain processing than men by engaging prefrontal and cingulated cortices. Okay, can you see my slides?
Ma'am, we can see the outline.
Okay. Now?
Yes, ma'am, good.
Okay. Dalai Lama, it's a very, I remember his argument. He argued that women have more biological potential for compassion than men. Does science support the claim? This is observation, and this is observation by many. Okay. See, stereotypically, females are portrayed as more nurturing and empathetic, while males are portrayed as less emotional and more cognitive. Now, important quantitative gender differences in the basic networks in the brain involved in affective and cognitive forms of empathy. And that's the reason why we really look at this particular software very carefully. Now, I'm going to talk about a very nice shade because Alim is there. That's why I put this. एक मुद्दत से मेरी माँ नहीं सोई ताबिश, मैंने एक बार कहा था मुझे डर लगता है. Now, this is a very emotional, aspect of the woman, who cares. Women may at times have higher levels of oxytocin, sometimes called as a cuddle hormone or love hormone, because it is linked to bonding, social connection, and monogamy. So this is a very, very important perspective which we must know, which comes from the culture or the social aspect. While women tend to express nurturing compassion, men tend to express fierce compassion. Okay, so this is something which we really need to take into account. Now, pink and blue tsunamis. Now, this is very, very important. Once we go even in the shop to buy for a girl or for a boy, they will start taking us to different sections. Okay, a pink section and a blue section, and they insist that for girls they are there. Okay, so even when apparent differences in the structure of the brain can be observed, there is always the possibility that they arise through nurture rather than nature. A boy and a girl may have very different experiences from the moment they enter the world, okay, as certain behaviors are certainly encouraged. Like they are bombarded with the gender concept, the way we look at pink and blue, the kind of gifts which we give, especially to a child who has not even seen the world, but it starts right then at the birth. Children as young as 24 months are highly sensitive to gender typical behaviors. Okay, so this is why the gender stereotyping of toys is such an important issue to address. In fact, there was a movement in Britain that let toys be toys. Why differentiate them, as male toys and female toys? That movement is still on, but this particular gender difference remain in the picture. Okay, so why toys are also so important? Toys and training opportunities are gendered. When you play with the toys, you start playing in a particular way as a boy and a girl. Okay, so children can be subjected to message about their gender, some subtle, others less so, that can alter the way they see their own place in this world, simply because it is a training opportunity even when they are playing comfortably with the toys, because that's what their brain learns. The another thing why women are multitaskers, well, uh, there are some studies which probably refute this idea, but many studies appreciate and accept this fact. It is widely held belief that women outperform men in multitasking situations, possibly because of an evolutionary advantage and extensive multitasking practice resulting from managing children, household, cooking, jobs. Okay, and female sex hormones acting on the brain may determine women's ability to multitask. See, this even a girl, she plays, with those toys which depict cooking, kitchen or the house, or taking care of the doll as a child. So she keeps doing this simultaneously. So brain probably gets nurtured, in terms of that aspect. Okay. Now, cultural influences, there is something called as a gender schema, a very important concept. Again, this concept comes and goes in the literature. Sandra Bain in 1981 proposed that a child's cognitive development combined with societal influences largely influence the patterns of thought, and that is schema, that dictate male and female traits. Okay, like the boy, a younger boy saying I want to be soldier, or the younger girl saying I want to be teacher. So these are the schemas. How people process information depends on the attitudes and beliefs that direct gender appropriate behavior. A girl raised in traditional culture might believe that the only path available to her as a woman is to get married and raise kids. However, by contrast, a girl raised in a more progressive culture might pursue a career, avoid having children, or decide not to get married. Same with the boys. The boys who probably think with a different path, instead of becoming soldier, they may like to become chef. Okay, so this is again an environmental contribution. Aggression is another thing, and there are a lot of gendered concept about it. Globally, men are more violent than women. Women are less typically aggressive than men. Women tend to engage in predominantly indirect aggression. And you can imagine that's a verbal aggression, or that's maybe passive behavior. We know little of the underpinnings of the women aggression. The area need to be still researched. But women generally, why are not directly aggressive? Because there is a fear of being harmed is a robust inhibitor of the direct aggression in women. Okay, whether there is a role of testosterone, oxytocin, and cortisol there, or in what way it is there, it is still very not so clear, not so evidence based as yet. Now, our brain is plastic. We believe that brain is neuroplastic, That simply means we can, keep molding that brain. It can be molded over the years with the environmental influences. That means nurture is acting on the brain, okay? So, a large body of research has shown that men and women have a very different experience coming through their environment. Maybe it is education, maybe it is socialization, maybe it is their careers. That means they are socialized extremely differently as of infancy. Okay, think about girls who are handed dolls and baby carriages to play with, suggesting nurturing and caring behavior, and boys who are handed superheroes and toy soldiers, suggesting fighting and protecting behaviors. So that's what exactly we see in the gender difference in normal human behavior. I don't think we need, neuroscientists or psychiatrists to identify the adolescent boys are more disturbed, more aggressive, more get carried away by the fear, more get carried away by the influence outside the environment. I think any ordinary person can understand that, and that's because this is cultural or social pressure which molds the brain. Now, response to stress. There is a lot of research and work on this in terms of the gender. I'm going to just get across few points. Men and women respond differently to stress. These differences may have certainly trained women to express compassion more explicitly. Shelley Taylor, she's another person who worked on the stress and the gender. That fight or flight response is characteristic of men, whereas women lean towards tend and befriend. Okay, so these are something which come again from the environment. Women faced with stressful situations are more likely to respond by socializing, by bonding with others, and seeking protection and nurturance within community. Evolutionarily adaptive sense, we have evolved in communities where women's primary responsibility was raising and protecting offspring who needed protection. So that's the way probably brain keep getting feedback and keep, getting to those environmental changes imbibed in the brain as brain, keeps change neuroplastically. And understanding that every brain is different from every other brain and not necessarily just a function of the sex of the brain's owner is a really important step forward in the 21st century. Gina Rippon, the lady who has written the book on the gendered brain. Now, gender roles can alter brain cells. The example of Chinese society during the Great Chinese Famine from 1959 to 1961, when many families preferred to spend their limited resources on boys, leading to higher rates of disability and illiteracy among female survivors in adulthood. Also, they found during this time the suicide in the women were more. Okay, so early life stress can be a gendered experience at it changes the neural epigenome. So we really have to take into account some of these experiences to understand the gendered brain. Okay, it is not the human brain that is inherently gendered, but the world in which we are raised, subtle cues about manly and ladylike behaviors from the moment of the birth mold our behaviors and abilities, which other scientists have then read as inherent innate differences. Okay, so ultimately, though we believe in biology, and there is no doubt we have to believe in the biology, but remember that brain doesn't work in isolation. Imagine if there is no environment, if there is no socialization opportunity, what would brain do? You know, if there is alone, just the gray cells are existing. See, brain development is because this particular organ is interacting with the environment. That means we cannot deny the experience which brain takes, the nurturing aspects which brain takes, the way brain react to the stress, and the impact of the stress on the brain. It's still a biology, but these impacts cannot be negated. Okay, and in the environment, the most important aspect is the gender. You know, being male and female, you know, maybe it is on continuing, which we see now. A continuing is an androgynous brain, you know, whether an androgynous brain with a well-balanced combination of both female and male features offers better mental health compared to a brain with predominantly female or male features remains an unanswered question. Some say perhaps it challenges, you know, the brain functioning, but still, you know, the impact on the brain, you know, which environment shows cannot be, ignored. Okay, so there is a world where there is a gender perspective. That means a gendered world will produce a gendered brain, you know, and this which probably in spite of being, are following the biological aspect or the neuropathology or the neurological aspect, we cannot deny the kind of impact environment has on the brain. Okay, so this is what I mean in gender brain. There is a lot of literature one can read, but these are some of the concepts which we need to understand and appreciate, because tomorrow, while diagnosing, while treating, you know, we have to take into account the environmental aspect, you know, on the brain pathology, maybe on the neurotransmitters, maybe on the brain size, you know, or maybe the functional aspect of the brain, you know, maybe the physiological perspective, but we have to take, you know, environment in the context of the brain whenever we think about even clinical application. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for a lucid presentation. We are enlightened by it. Can we invite any question answers? Any queries are there? You can post the question in the chat box, or maybe you can raise your hand and the host can unmute you.
Either they understood or not, you know. But it is simple. I am trying to say that biology is important, but not without environmental impact on the brain.
Sure, ma'am, sure.
Yeah.
Ma'am, you were talking about this gendered environment, but again, that environment is again caused by the gendered brain that are pre-existing.
Yeah.
So we are stuck in
But
loop.
what, you know, the issue is what came first, you know, or how I mean, when we see neuroplasticity, the changeable character of the brain, we have to appreciate it is not without environment. Okay, so we have to look into that. Yes.
So basically what we want to say is brains may be hardwired in a different way,
Yes.
both the genders, but it is quite a bit affected by the environment where you
Yes.
are placed.
Yes.
So any queries or comments on this topic? So, ma'am, any comments on the matriarchal societies that are there in many parts of the world and in some parts of India also?
Yes, see, we really need research because this particular aspect of biology is important. But you know, the whole issue becomes very important that biology we look at in isolation, right? In isolation, and environment is a big influence. As I said, brain cannot be a organ, you know, which exists with so much power unless and until environment is there. So future research should include self-report data on male-female behavioral traits within different contexts, for example, work, home, and social setting, which could further elucidate the relationship between, I feel, psychologically androgyny and the concept of the brain androgyny. So this is a very, very important. We really need to develop this research over the years further.
Yeah, and then why in these sort of discussions, I think we should try to keep ourselves gender neutral, because
Yes, absolutely.
the men
Absolutely.
start taking the men's uh, favor, and the ladies start doing that. So if you're working in academics, first thing is you have to find a neutral place. You have to be detached and not defend or be defensive about some position. So whatever is there, then we can take it up better. And there is a question
Yeah,
in the chat box.
I would give example. Rashmi knows about this. My case of Deepika Parmar, you know, who killed one child, you know, and we fought this case for 11 years. It is still now going to High Court. Now the whole issue of Deepika Parmar killing the child is not appreciated because she is female, and if she is a female, she is a mother. So she, you know, the concept of she can have postpartum psychosis and she can get affected by this and she can kill the child in that postpartum psychosis is not being appreciated, you know, on the legal field. You know, this is a very important, I mean, this is one case which made me to go through this particular aspect, you know, so deeply.
Yeah. Ma'am, there is a question in the chat box by Nod. What role can brain structure play in gender dysphoria? So basically, gender fluidity, gender dysphoria, and how does neurobiology correlate with that?
Yes, basically because see, the dysphoria, the way, you know, it is being expressed in the environment and the way the stress act on the brain, you know, so there we have to look from the perspective of gender. See, we keep saying that depression is 2 times more common, you know, in the women in comparison to men. Now, why do we come to this conclusion? This is a very important. Maybe are we not ready to identify the depression in men because the way they express their stress, you know, or are we labeling the depression in women more or pathologizing more because the way they express it? So these are some of the issues which we really need to look at, you know, and that's why the gender brain matters.
Sure, ma'am. Sure. Any other questions or queries? You can put in the chat box, or you can unmute and ask directly. So, ma'am, suppose if we change the environment from a patriarchy based to matriarchy based. Suppose at 3 years of age, at 10 years of age, at 20 years of age. So till what age are these things more or less imprinted on the brain?
See, as I said, even by 24 months, the children are very sensitive to this particular gender-related behavior in the environment, and from there they pick up. Okay, so if we change that, like some women, they don't marry, they don't want to have a child, so definitely they are raised in a little bit different atmosphere than the traditional setup where the marriage and having children becomes a absolute dharma of the lady, basically. So these are some of the important perspective. Of course, the brain is moldable, brain is plastic, so we can do some of these experiments and see what happens.
Ma'am, any comments on the density of synapses or the connections that the brain has? With
Yes.
the,
See, the white, the gray cells are more in the main, right? Then if you look at the corpus callosum, basically that's supposed to be thick in the women, I think. Okay, is that Rashmin? That is, there is an issue of corpus callosum which they say, and that's the reason why, the multitasking aspect in the women is being explained on that particular aspect. So we really have to look more. I mean, there are some of these researches are coming in that particular way.
Dr. Rashmin, any comments from you?
No, I think it's been quite a enlightening and interesting discussion. And there are certain communities which have moved to the matriarchal model.
Yes.
And there have been certain communities which are traditionally matriarchal in nature. For example, people in Meghalaya, people in certain areas of Arunachal and Assam, uh, the, the, the mother is the chief of the family. Women are not only expected to, but entitled to retain their maternal names throughout their entire lifetime. It is the husband who actually goes and lives with the wife, as opposed to it being the other way around. So it might be interesting to see if there are any biological substrates to the brain changes or development in this kind of a population. It provides a perfect contrast and a perfect study to be able to understand if these societal influences have been not just eliminated but sometimes upended altogether. Does that in any way make their brains different? In other words, is it the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail? So it might be an interesting finding to study, say, the brain scans of women in these kind of
Yes,
cultures. There are
yes.
certain African tribes as well where women are the protagonists of the entire society. There are in the animal kingdom, it is the female who actually leads the family, and males are restricted in their jobs of just procreating, and then that's the end of it. Uh, so there is a lot of precedence to the matriarchal model. What is important is that if there are some biological changes in men and women, uh, I think the societal norms are probably biasing us to an extent where we are actually blinding ourselves to the biological differences which are inherent in our genetic makeup. And rather than being able to understand those differences and capitalize on those differences, this entire concept or this entire quest of equality and getting rid of the gender biases is probably not helping us understand the biological changes and the biological advantages slash disadvantages of each of the genders, which now obviously these days psychiatry is far more biological than it used to be, and we have enough people in the academic forum these days to constantly drive that point home. But nurture and nature both are obviously quite a major influence, as Dr. Parkar has rightly pointed out. So maybe it might be interesting to see if this kind of nurture model would have, a reverse engineering effect on the brain. So if the brain biology, the brain connections are different in these kind of patient population or subject population, let's not call them patients, it might give us a very interesting perspective. Dr. Parkar,
Yes,
do you have any?
yes, yeah.
There is a question in the chat box, ma'am, by Dr. Prakash Jain.
Prakash Jain.
Prakash Jain, yeah. How would the concept of gendered brain explain gender queer? What about their neurobiology, anatomical and physiological?
Yeah, I think on but that particular issue there is not much of a literature. The question is very right. Even I was trying to harp on that, but not a much of a literature. So I won't be able to say much on this. This is a very important, and when I was working on this question came to my mind also. A very sharp question, but it's a very important. I mean, not much research also there either, in terms of the gender perspective. But it is interesting why what I feel is the idea that has its roots in the 18th century and still persists today. I mean, it's not a very, it still persists today, and when we have the fantastic plastic brains, they are plugged into gender world, a world that has, for 100 years dictate the sexes differently. So that's the reason why I personally feel that we have to look. I mean, this particular area always remain the area of my interest. So.
So maybe what we are seeing different is more because of the society and the norms and the.
I'm keeping biology intact. We are not challenging the biology. See, the biologists, they don't appreciate the psychosocial perspective. But remember that otherwise, if there is no society, if there is no environment, the brain has no meaning. It is as clear as that. Okay, brain cannot function in isolation without interacting with the environment, with the nurture, and that's the reason why that impact needs to be looked at in a more deeper way, in much better way.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Rashmi, can we start to wind up now?
Sure, please.
I think we have, and if there are any questions, last chance to put them through. Otherwise, we can wind up now. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for throwing the light on this subject. What I gather is two things. First, while studying, we have to be on a neutral base. And second, most of the things, the research is actually not available. So whatever there is, whatever we are gathering is maybe literature, maybe the colonial hangover, the Victorian era that we have been handed over. So this superiority and inferiority, I think this is a wrong path to go in. Rather than two different subsets, may be complementary to each other, may not be complementary to each other, but definitely no contest of one being superior or one being inferior. So I think that would be my take-home message. So thank you so much, ma'am. Over to Dr. Rashmi for the winding up.
Great. Very interesting discussion and a very different perspective. We all know about it, but we haven't really focused on it. And it was a very nice thought process initiated by Dr. Parkar. And I hope it has provoked everybody to try and think about it and try and understand the nuances of the brain biology in the context of gender and the societal impact of the gender differences And also to extrapolate from this and be able to understand how it can manifest as different kind of mental disorders, and what are the efforts we need to put in to promote mental health, which can be a little bit more gender specific, if not gender sensitive. So a very, very interesting topic and a very interesting talk, and very well presented by Dr. Parkar. And of course, Dr. Siddiqui moderated it in a very lucid and very subtle manner as well. So thank you very much, Dr. Parkar and Dr. Siddiqui, for having made the time for us today. We are really grateful to you for being with us and encouraging us to keep having these kind of topics and having these kind of discussions to stimulate the young postgraduate students of our country. We promise to try and make every effort to bring you these kind of interesting topics, and we hope you benefit from these as much as we enjoy putting it together for you. So thank you all, and all the postgraduate students and some of the consultants as well who logged in. Thank you for your persistence and your support. And of course, it would be remiss on my part to not thank Sun Pharma for their unflinching and unconditional support in this academic venture. We see you again next month with another interesting topic. Until then, I wish all of you a great evening ahead, and take care. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
So we see with you on in the evening.